Good morning. Welcome to Paper Talk.
Over the next few minutes or so, we're going to take a close look through the sports pages to see what's making the headlines.
And here to assist us is journalist Dan Kilpatrick, chief football correspondent for the Evening Standard. Good morning to you, Dan. How are you?
Good morning, guys. Yeah, very well, thank you.
Good. We're going to start with the Sun and the fallout from Chelsea's shock Champions League defeat to Dinamo Zagreb.
Yeah, so we heard from Thomas Tuchel earlier here on Sky Sports News. The Sun confirming, really, that he's not a happy man. Dan, the headline is slapping Tuchel.
I'm so glad that fell to you.
What's the story behind that headline?
Yeah, well, this is Thomas Tuchel furious at Chelsea's 1-0 defeat to Dinamo Zagreb last night and really laying into his team in his post-match press conference afterwards. He talked about a lack of hunger, a lack of intensity. He said they're not determined enough individually. And he even talked about them kind of lacking the smell of blood, which I think refers to their kind of killer instinct in the final third. So really, Thomas Tuchel, not a happy man this morning. And that's kind of been a theme since before the start of the season. If you remember, after that friendly against Arsenal in the US, he kind of really laid into his players then and said they weren't ready for the season. And they've obviously started with some pretty patchy form. So things not all well at Chelsea at the moment. And Tuchel not happy at all. And I think he also suggested that he thought the win over West Ham at the weekend was a kind of turning point, and he didn't see last night coming. So I think he's a bit kind of lost for answers at the moment and just kind of scratching his head as to what's going wrong with this side.
What's this about him potentially cancelling players' time off?
Yeah, I mean, that's mentioned in the piece. I mean, I think cancelling days off is normally pretty standard fare for managers after a bad result. You know, you hear it quite a lot, but I suppose this season it could be even more significant given the schedule. Chelsea are playing every 3 or 4 days. They've got Fulham in the lunchtime kickoff on Saturday. So I think cancelling days off during this kind of run is probably more significant for players. It just means that they're in kind of every single day and working really hard. So yeah, Tuchel seemingly going for the stick after the carrot not really working out for him.
So Dan, this is Chelsea's third defeat in the last 17 days, not that I'm counting. What is going wrong at Stamford Bridge?
Yeah, I think they've got a lot of problems, really. I mean, if you look at the team, as soon as N'Golo Kante drops out of the side, they just don't look as solid. They don't look the same side without Kante. He's obviously, Tuchel, trying to build a whole new defence this season after losing a couple of big players in the summer. And he's got problems in attack as well. They've just lacked a cutting edge for a long time, and that predates this season. He's brought in Aubameyang to try and make a difference, but there's still a lot of forwards in that side, I think, who are fairly kind of inconsistent, and he's struggling to get them to produce consistently in the final third, particularly. I mean, Kai Havertz is a good example of that, but Pulisic, Ziyech, they're in the same boat, really. So I think he's got problems in terms of the football, but clearly, if you read his comments last night and on the back page of the Sun today, he thinks there are a lot of mentality issues there. Again, he talks about the lack of hunger, the lack of intensity, them not being determined enough. So I think it's a combination of football problems and kind of mentality problems and focus problems, at least according to Tuchel.
Right, we're going to stay with Chelsea, actually, for our second story, and contract news concerning one of their players. And it's from your paper as well, Dan, the Evening Standard. What's this about Édouard Mendy? What's the latest with him?
Yeah, this is from my colleague Nizar Kinsella, who's very, very good on Chelsea. So I'm sure this story's bang on. And he said Chelsea are keen to tie Mendy to a new long-term deal. Obviously, they've just done Reece James. There's talk of Mason Mount getting one as well. What Nizar has said is that Mendy could be a little trickier than James, certainly because he's already rejected one offer, and I think what the piece suggests is that Chelsea are in a difficult situation because Kepa, who's their reserve keeper, but still the most expensive keeper in football history, is on a huge contract of around £190,000 a week. And obviously, if you're Mendy, you're going to be wanting the same money or better money, given that he's Chelsea's number one. But they haven't offered him those kind of terms yet. So Chelsea want to do that. He's under contract till 2025, so I don't think there's going to be a huge rush or a huge amount of urgency for them to do that imminently, but clearly it's something the new owners want to do. They've had this really busy transfer window, and now the focus, now it's closed, is clearly turning onto tying their players down to new long-term contracts where possible.
Okay, we're going to move on to the Times then. Some strong words from Eric Bailly in here. The headline is Bailly accuses United of favouring English players. So the Manchester United defender is currently on loan at Marseille, but this is words that he's had to say about his time at Old Trafford. What did you make of this?
Yeah, this is a really interesting comment from Eric Bailly. He's obviously on loan at Marseille and going to play at Spurs tonight. So he's been talking about his time in English football, and he said, Manchester United should avoid favouring English players. And clearly he feels that he wasn't given enough opportunities last season. I think he only made 4 league appearances last term, albeit he had a very injury-hit campaign again. He doesn't mention any names, but I think the implication here is pretty clear. I mean, Harry Maguire had a really difficult season last year, plays by his position, obviously at centre-half, and I think the implication from Bailly is that Solskjaer and Ralph Rangnick, who were in charge of United last season, picked Maguire consistently over him. That's interesting now, given that Erik ten Hag has come in and just dropped Maguire, of course, for Varane and Martinez, the new signing. And Bailly also adds that ten Hag wanted to keep him and said he'd like him to stay at the club over the summer, but he wanted to go and play regular first-team football. So some really interesting comments, and I'm sure we'll hear a little bit more of that in the days to come.
Well, we always like to end on some transfer news, and Wolves targeting a familiar face if they can't get Diego Costa.
That familiar face is Andy Carroll. Tell us more about this one, Dan. This one's in the Telegraph.
Yeah, I mean, this is a great story, really interesting story in a few ways. I mean, Wolves, obviously trying to sign Diego Costa, formerly of Chelsea, on a free transfer. I think he just left Atlético Mineiro, who are a Brazilian club, and he's a free agent, so they could potentially get him outside the transfer window to solve their problems up front. I think both their strikers are injured now, Wolves. They've got real problems in the final third. It sounds like Costa may not get a work permit. They're appealing that decision at the moment, but he's not played enough for Spain to automatically qualify. So Wolves are obviously having a look around the market for other potential options, and they appear to have landed on Andy Carroll, according to the Telegraph, as you say. And the problem, I guess, with Andy Carroll is that they'd be signing a very injury-hit forward to replace their 2 injured forwards, right? Because Andy Carroll, we know on his day he can be a brilliant player, but he's really struggled in his career with staying fit. I think it would be really intriguing to see him back in the Premier League. He's clearly a huge threat in the air. He's got that kind of stardust. He can score goals from nowhere. But I think the question for Wolves would be, if they get him in and they can't get Costa, could they keep him fit enough to consistently contribute?
Well, I, for one, would love to see Costa back in the Premier League, I have to say.
I want Carroll back. So I'm all on that one.
We're torn. Right, Dan, it's been great to have you on this morning. Thanks ever so much. We'll see you soon.
Thanks.